Welcome back to my channel, and today we are painting an autumn scenery. A couple weeks ago I was in the city center and I saw those beautiful red-orange trees, so I thought I might take a picture and paint it as well. I used some deep yellow lemon and then I used some cadmium red to make a really nice bright orange. I made sure that the brushes and the waters are clean, so it's not mixing up with some dirty water and it's making it really muddy orange, which is not so nice. The trees were on the Linnansaari. In Oulu we have different names, and Linnansaari means basically castle island, because in this area there was a castle around 600 years ago, which was made out of wood and stones, so it was not that large and not that stable, as it got burned down around 200 years ago. However, observatory was built there instead and turned into a cafe where you can still find small exhibition of this castle. I built up a little bit of the bright orange and yellow colors here, and then I start with the light colors instead, so I can add dark colors later on, although I did not add really the sky, which I add more at the end. I continue with the green, very light green, and spread the paint around. And next to the orange in the trees, adding more and more of the light green colors, and I can add later on some more darker bluish colors. I don't mind that the orange mixes with the green a little bit, so it still has this really nice flow effect. Then adding here a little bit more of the bluish green, so basically I mixed like this light green with some more ultramarine blue or some turquoise blue, and building it up a little bit so it's still wet to wet. I try to work really fast. And then I continue with the ground and just adding like the same light green as before, which is basically made from lemon yellow and some ultramarine blue. Make sure that you have a lot of paint so you don't really run out. And adding here a little bit of burnt sienna. And then continue with the darker spots, the same as I have used in the bushes and the tree. I'm split a little bit of my brush so I can make a small grass. And the kind of directing to my person which I draw, it gives a nice focal point. I thought I'd add a little bit of a purple because it kind of goes well with the orange. Then I add at the top of the trees some loose leaves, so it's standing out a little bit, it's not all mixed together. Mostly I use kind of like orange, and then around that I will add later on some more paint of green. So it looks a little bit nicer, and it gives the idea that there's a foreground, the tree is in the foreground and the bushes are more at the back. And then adding here and there a little bit more of a darker orange, as well as adding here some loose leaves in the bushes, so with a smaller brush. So later I also paint it over, and it gives the idea that there are some lighter spots. Now I continue a little bit with the background, and I use dark green, but the pigments are not very strong, so the idea is really that not to put so much focus at the back, and adding here a little bit more of the dark colors, as well as trying to add some white bits, but it did not work out so much. Then I start to build up more darker colors with darker pigments. I left the trunk of the trees, especially on the right side, white, so I will add later on a little bit of a bluish colors, but I don't want to add too much colors. I don't make it too dark. This is the reason that the background is a little bit more darker, so that white trunks are really kind of more emphasized. And I start to add more and more details of some more leaves after the first layer has dried. So it's not really like one leaf after one leaf, but it's emphasizing that adding a little bit more of a volume. My only focus here at behind the trees, the main trees. There were many bushes, and many trees didn't really single them out, because the focus is basically the beautiful orange red trees, and then the person as well. You can see a little bit of the cafeteria, which used castle was standing. I try not to overpaint my dog walker here too much, although it's gonna be a little bit more darker colors, but just leave it out for now. And then I continue adding more kind of like a different greens. It's more like some lighter green, and then adding some more turquoise blue and making it more darker, especially at the bottom or around the top of the bushes, just to emphasize the bushes itself. It is really important that you add some more darker colors, especially around the lighter areas, just to make them pop out. So my problem was generally not using that much color, and it looks a little bit, my previous paintings looked a little bit more flat. And here at the top I had more and more bluish colors. And I try also to vary a little bit the strength, so really around the trunks on the branches of the main tree or trees really at the right side is kind of like darker. And then emphasizing some here and there loose trees with a thinner brush, or loose branches within the bushes. And then adding here and there when it has dried out a little bit more of the lighter green as well, so between the orange. Then I add the some very watered down ultramarine blue at the background, although in reality there were some like another bushes of trees, but I thought it might be a little bit too much. And then I continue with the top of the orange trees and just adding a little bit darker pigments, orange, the same ones as I have used before, just to give it a little bit more life. Here and there I use a split brush to add more different kind of directions and more of loose leaves, but not too much. And then just continue basically with the small details. And adding more and more darker colors if you like. I continue with the bushes and adding there as well some more loose leaves. So it's kind of like it's a mixture of having like really blurred background and then adding or having blurred wet tree ground and adding here and there some more loose trees, especially around the orange. I continue with the trunks of the trees, so in between there are several trees, so in between I leave a little bit of a space for now and adding really light pigments of a mixture of purple and then adding here and there of a burnt umber. With the light tree I try not to overdo it, adding too much of colors and kind of like paint over a little bit of the branches and let it dry. So I have a little bit, later on I have more of an idea where I want to point out the branches and where shall I not to overdo it. The tree at the back, although it's a little bit further away, I added really strong colors, partly because on the photo it was really in the shadow and the trunk was really dark, so I mixed the very dark brown out of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. And then I add with a thinner brush some branches here and there. A good tip is where the intersection is between the branches with more like a little bowl, but really adding a little bit more paint there so it looks thicker and it looks a little bit more realistic. Also here at the back, try to have a variation of the strength with the branches, so it's not looking all the same. And I think here as well, at the back, some more darker branches. So now I work with the lighter tree, and I think darker branches, so it pops out a little bit more. But it's kind of like it's going from bush to bush and from tree to tree, so you have to look where you want to add more and more of paint and more branches. It's really sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to decide because you want to keep it simple. Then continue with the lighter tree and I think more of a ultramarine blue. A little bit darker in pigment, and I try to emphasize the form of the tree. As well as adding here and there a little bit more grass around the bushes. For the grass I used basically the same green but with a thinner brush, and for the sake that I wanted to paint in a specific direction, so where I wanted to have we are basically focusing on this. And also the size of the grass matters a little bit, so more at the front it's a little bit bigger, and then towards the focus, so my dog walker, it gets thinner. And then I continue with the steps to the cafeteria, which at some point I should paint because after all it has such a historical significance. Here I used really like colder colors, and it's really ultramarine blue, and then made some really nice purple with some crimson red. I actually never been to this cafeteria myself. I remember that they used to have actually ice cream for dogs, so I was really interested to go there, but my dogs have a little bit of a social anxiety, and taking them to a larger place takes some nerves and loads of snacks for them besides the ice cream, so we never went, and then Corona came and barely leaving own house apart from going to the shop. When the tree has dried a little bit, then adding more of darker colors and more details as well, but not to completely overdo it. I try to add a little bit pigment there, and then a little bit of light paint which is very wet, and then adding more of the dark colors, so it's still mixing together. Mostly I emphasize the sides of the trees, so it's not so dark in the middle. And I try to have not continuous lines when painting the branches as well, so it gives more the idea of realistic way. Then I continue with the steps or with the stone wall and adding here and there a little bit more darker colors as well as with the trees, and try not to overdo with the continuous lines, so it's a little bit broken here and there. And then here more of the darker pigments. Now I'll continue with my wonderful dog walker. Originally I had put some blue color, but it really did not stick out, and I think maybe red would have been far better for the person. But I then changed it to a little bit darker colors, and it still pops out here. For the doggy I used a little bit burnt amber. Maybe you can use a smaller brush than I used. It makes the life a little bit easier. And then when everything has dried, I add a little bit more details, like for the grass if it fits, and then looking where else I can add of a darker colors, of a darker pigment to emphasize basically the shape, for example, of the tree and the shapes of the branches. Tried to focus on the injections, so it's kind of nicer. I believe we are done here. It was fun to paint, and remember to subscribe.